J'espère que vous avez bien déjeuné. On va maintenant
So, I hope you had a good lunch. Now we're going to have how is artificial intelligence going to transform our industry, the progress that's there. This doesn't just concern the tech sector, also the manufacturing sector. The transformation has been initiated with development and impacts on processes, on products, on credit management. And we're going to talk about it with our participants, Carine Pichon, Aurélien Duthoit, Olivier Thivon, et Yoann Bersihand. Donc, please come up on the stage.
Merci d'être avec nous.
Thank you for attending here with us this afternoon, and we're going to start with you, Aurélien. You're the specialist for artificial intelligence. You're ICT economist at Coface. Carine is the general director for Western Europe and Africa in Coface. Olivier Thivon, who's vice president omnichannel in Sonepare, and Yoann Bersihand, VP AI technology in Schneider Electric. So we're going to start with you, Aurélien, and we're going to see what the situation is today. You know, AI is on everyone's lips today. Perhaps it's a little too much. Do you have the impression that there has been there's a bubble, media bubble, probably, without wanting to incriminate you personally, or the journalistic profession? There's a fatality involved. That, because we're talking about a bubble with respect to AI. Is that on one side you've got investors and economists who are very interested in bubbles for the last century or so, and then you've got AI, which is practically as old as IT itself, and the term actually started in the 50s. And so the problem wasn't raised in those terms before. What's changed everything, and what the catalyst was, also like the air that filled this bubble, was the launch of ChatGPT at the end of 2022, which brought to the greater public, and sort of like youth has been able to sort of like get to know it and seen some of the possibilities which is behind it. They see it as being something necessary and virtuous, but you've got to have the constraints in mind. The first constraint is that the confusion that can exist between the generative AI and then AI in its entirety, and which tends to all the sort of like all the other types of AI before, and which are documented, everything that existed before Gen AI. You can see, for example, in industry, all the nanotechnology or predictive maintenance, or using video, or the algorithmic recommendations, which is already in marketing and media. All of these things are applications of AI, which arrived before generative AI, and which tried and tested uses. The confusion with the other part, which it tends to make Gen AI as a cure for all ills, everything that existed before. The second constraint for this appropriation of AI by the greater public is the reverse of the wow factor. I don't know if you've worked with it before. If you've worked, I don't know if you've worked with it before. Sort of like, we worked on this round table with a model of. No, it's a joke. I'll have to read the script to see. There's a wow effect which is real, and which tends to contribute to the fact that the greater public doesn't really understand the technical supports for AI, which are probability calculates. This experience only gives us an indication. We've tried it. This experience, either on Diptyque or on ChatGPT, was asking us to end the dog is on the, and then you ask the application to end the sentence. The sofa. No, there is no intelligence. If you're going to ask somebody to finish the sentence, you're going to sort of like, an AI is going to say, the dog's on the sofa because it's the most probable answer on the basis of its training, unless you give it some context.
Oui, c'est vrai. À question pas très maligne, réponse pas très maligne. C'est juste.
So, like, if you don't ask the right questions, you don't get proper answers. But you know, the AI has a lot of miscomprehensions because it's based on probabilities. But it's based on probability and not on real intelligence as we understand it. So there's dystopian stories, you know, sort of like that it's going to, you know, take over and get rid of us all because it's more intelligent than we are, or the other side of the medal, which means that AI, or Gen AI, is a type of cure for all the ills of society at large. So that everybody's talking about is wonderful. It's just that our media attention time is limited, and then we sort of like we tend to stick to these negative stories, and we tend not to hear the moderate voices. So we're going to try to be audible today. And just to answer your question seriously about the financial bubble or an excess value of some of the companies involved in terms of artificial intelligence, there's probably a little, there's probably excessive valuation at the moment. You know, companies that have been listed, and or some of the startups that haven't been listed, you know, sort of like, when you see the funds that they're able to raise, it's a very essential stake. You know, if you've got a lot of, if you're a venture capitalist and you've got capital to invest, if you're an industrialist, you know, sort of like a lot of very important stakes involved as well. There's a lot of impact on the market. It's important for credit insurance as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. If, on the other hand, if you're on the industry side, the question intellectually can be stimulating. If I can talk to you just, sort of like if you talk about one, you know, sort of like similarity with the internet bubble at the beginning of the 2000s, which was the typical bubble, you know, sort of like there was a lot of, there was a lot of excess capacity, there was a lot of telecom networks that we were using, and there were too many servers, there were too many modems, etc. And we did an overcapacity with respect to infrastructure. For use, we had uses that didn't correspond to any need, and we had uses that were useful, but the business model wasn't there. So there was a risk. There were frauds and excesses that were revealed. And if you look at all the proxies for the adoption of internet during the beginning of the 2000s, or even if you say from 1995 to 2010, you can see the effects of the internet bubble. There was, you know, sort of like an explosion of the internet bubble, but it didn't stop the technology being adopted. You know, you'd less than 5% with an internet at the beginning of the 2000s, and now was 60, 70% at the end of the decade. So you can't dissociate the two subjects. But the relationship between both isn't as automatic as one might think. And just if you look at current affairs with DeepSeek, you can also see a situation where you see the bubble deflating. It's not going to change the use. With DeepSeek, we can see that you can have very interesting results with a lesser cost. So if DeepSeek costs less, sets prices at cheaper than its competitors, so all the competitors are going to try to get on an even keel. And also with respect to the valuation of companies, because the valuation is an anticipation of the profits that can be generated. And of course, that's going to be, if you look at the use case, it's extremely positive. If you're a user, because AI is going to cost less. So in concrete terms, where are the stakes involved? There are lots of stakes. I don't think you can quote them all. Some are going to be, some of our experts are going to be shed light on them, sort of like there's IT services. I think there's a lot of growth, about 9% a year. if you're one of the companies that's working on the infrastructure, you've got growth perspectives and forecasts, which macroeconomically, I think, Taiwan, for example, 95% of the chips made to train AI, and all of the pieces for the data centers are assembled in Taiwan. So the future of AI is going to be in Taiwan, if I extrapolate. And if I go from, Taiwan is exporting $200 billion a year. It's more than the exports of cars. So it's a significant amount. And also, a little nuance with respect to what I've said is that the growth forecasts with respect to AI shouldn't be reserved uniquely for tech. It's also people using tech in order to increase market share, or because the product is going to function better, or is going to try to have better prices. The second, we were talking about productivity with Jean-Christophe Cafèche, who's an economist-in-chief. With the productivity gains is also an important factor with AI. We've got a number of use cases, a number of sectors, a number of functions, which is sufficiently important today. So we can say that there's a reserve of productivity which is considerable beyond the examples that we have today. If I were to take an example today, is the development of IT. So an experienced developer with AI is going to work 40 to 50% faster. And the fact that we're looking who's using it the most at the moment, it's the IT sector. So the sector is the first consumer of its own products, which is a good sign, which means they trust their own products. I don't know if it's like if you see a chef eating at the table of their own restaurant. It's a sign of trust. And then the third factor is that the countries and the companies that adopted faster have an advantage in terms of growth and productivity. They're going to be more competitivity and, of course, competitive edge in a sector. But the phenomenon is too much of a minority to be able to make macroeconomic forecasts for the moment. But I think we're going to be able to talk about it more in depth in the future. Another example is India. You look at the stakes involved for the adoption of AI in India. India is the biggest exporter in the world of IT services, $750 billion of IT services every year. If, for one reason or another, the Indian companies put off adopting AI, it means that other countries, for example, Morocco, Tunisia, Eastern European countries, I'm thinking of Poland, Romania, and other countries in Southeast Asia, who are trying to get involved in the IT service sector, if they get on the AI train faster than India, it means they'll be able to reduce the cost with respect to India, and they'll be able to gain market share. And just to finish up with India, so it's an economy that's rather closed, and that AI is going to be the question of infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, necessary for data centers for AI, and it's a difficult subject. It's a thorny issue. So for the three stakes that seem to be the most urgent, we'll come back to others. There's sovereignty, there's geopolitics, there's human resources, there's social and labour issues, there's also environmental issues. But I think to go into all of this, I think we need more than one round table. So thank you very much for this introduction. So let's talk about the competitive edge for two examples of companies, not just Schneider Electric, but a vision for all of the companies with you, Carine Pichon. You're, of course, in contact with these companies, with a lot of companies. Do you feel a form of pressure that weighs on these companies in order to be able to adopt these AI tools? And does everyone feel that they're on the same level? I don't know if we can talk about pressure, but on the other hand, we can be sure it's difficult for us to ignore the issue. What is interesting is that AI is one of the most rapid technological revolutions to have taken place. It's been said quite a lot that in the history of scientific research, the speed of transfer has never been as fast. You know, everyone's around us has more or less used it, or somebody we know has used it. That's been using Gen AI. And when we were talking about internet a while ago, if we think that once the internet for the greater public was launched, we needed about 10 years to get it completely rolled out. So you can see the public rollout of AI was really fast. And also the question was of sovereignty has been raised. You know, world geopolitics, American companies, to start with them, in 2024, invested more than 160 billion euros in construction of data centers to use, to function the algorithms, and a company that has 95% of the processor market share. That is, you know, it's NVIDIA, which is an American company, so you've got the US, which are investing massively in the hardware. On the other side, we've got China. Of course, we've got champions, Alibaba and Baidu, and you know these companies. But the figures that we were looking at, we're talking about 15 billion, 160 one side, 15 on the other. There's, you know, slides 1 to 10. So, of course, that'll show you the strength, relative strength of the countries. And then you look around us in Europe, but we don't, of course, we don't have that magnitude with respect to investment. So companies, what are they saying? First of all, we've got to look at Gen AI. It's impossible not to look at it. There are subjects, how much am I going to invest? What's going to be my ROI? So it's easy. Look at innovation and growth and productivity. But how am I going to integrate all of that in practical terms in my processes, in my companies, internally? It's a challenge, and so companies are working on it. There's been a recent study by McKinsey that shows us between 2018 and 2023 that we think about 50% who started using AI, generative in particular, in 2024, we're already up to 72%. So there's an acceleration in the use of this AI with a rhythm of adoption that can be different depending on the sector. Which, when you look to adopt this technology, we need about 3 main factors. The first, you've got to look at regulatory factors that can be more or less favorable. So like access to customer data that's not closed off. And so, of course, this can facilitate adoption. Then the degree of maturity with respect to data. To have data, that's great, but we've got to have structured data, protected data, reliable data that enables us to train models. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And then the third factor, which is important, and like Aurélien was already saying, we've got to have human resources, expertise, know-how, with respect to IT and technology to be able to use this data. So these 3 factors are leading us today. These are tech sectors which are using it because they're benefiting from all of this. It'd be very reductive to say that it's not just the tech sector, but we've got 2 customers here. We've got data. We digitize it. We see the use cases. We see the consumption. We see the use cases in the industry. And so, just to answer your question, yes, we can see it in some sectors, but we can see the expansion as well. The expansion has been exponential. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carine. So we're going to look into 2 very concrete examples of companies who've adopted AI, namely Schneider Electric and Sonepar. Schneider Electric, world leader for industrial technology, 150,000 employees. You are VP technology at Schneider. technologies. So that was a turning point when it comes to AI in your company. So how have you approached the subject? How have you developed it? Thank you, and hello everyone. Thank you for the invitation. So just two words about Schneider Electric. So we're a growing technological company. We're amongst the 30 first companies in terms of softwares. I'm saying that, I'm specifying that, because when I entered Schneider Electric 10 years ago, it was far from being the case. So our mission is to support our clients, their sustainability plans on 4 areas: buildings, data centers, industry, and the energy networks, the energy grids, what we call macro grids, up to the local points related to production and energy production consumption. So it's about these 4 areas. So 3 years ago, our CEO, who's now our chairman, decided to infuse AI for Schneider Electric to be changed into another company, an AI-based company, namely using AI for the group to be more efficient. Human resources, finance, supply chains, logistics, because we have 200 plants at Schneider's that can produce the products and solutions that we offer our clients. It's a true playfield for learning. It's also about customers' relations, several interesting cases when it comes to AI. So it's about infusing AI for the different business lines in the group, and also AI to solve clients' related problems when it comes to energy in industry. That we couldn't. That was difficult for us to solve before AI. A specification. It's a subject that is applied to all the group. Indeed, it was pushed forward by our CEO. Our ambition was not to do AI as in terms of demos, proof of concept, and so on. It was rather, right from the onset, to approach, to tackle AI. So we've switched from 30 persons initially working on AI up to 350 persons, employees working on AI in less than 18 months. And so this is something that we had to integrate very quickly, and we had to address the right use cases with the most impact for our clients. Externally, what about the tangible impact for our clients? What does AI bring for your clients? 600 million. This is the number of tons of CO2 that we've managed to save or to avoid for our clients since 2018. As a reference, 1 ton of CO2 is a return travel Paris-New York. Now the figure is 600 million, and we strongly believe that AI is going to help us achieving our ambition. So we're using AI on 3 different areas. First, the energy intensive, also desalination of water in the Middle East, also air conditioning systems, heating, cooling systems in buildings, and also in Croatia, for instance, we have a network of urban heating system. We've equipped this urban heating system in urban areas, and we've managed to work on the prediction as for when heating is going to be needed and how to disseminate this the required heating. This optimizes operations as for all the equipments and the heating systems. Impressive. Now, what about Sonepar? How have you appropriated to yourself AI? You provide solutions to those professionals working in the electrical and electronic equipments. There are a number of brands distributing your products in 40 countries. What is your strategy when it comes to AI? I suggest that now we're in the shoes of a salesperson to understand our strategy. So imagine you're in a sunny power agency, you receive a call, an electrician calling you for a photovoltaic project. In real time, you need in a catalogue of 1.5 million references. You need to instantaneously, to immediately find the right solution at the right time for this client amongst the millions of clients that are existing with a preference for this specific way of working, amongst the pricing dedicated to cost, to client-related product, and so on. So the manual model is going to be very limited, and it's not a simple engine that is going to be a solution to solve the problem. So when it comes to AI, it's going to be a way to solve this use case with the generated part that we mentioned, but also through traditional AI with the best recommendation at this specific moment in time. So an ultra-personalization, customization of the offer. Yes, we like to refer to segment 2.1, namely hyper customization. We know that this, as for this client's been ordering Schneider products for 10 years. So we know that the products to be dealt with for this client is going to be Schneider. So it's only with AI that we can achieve this level of granularity of details. So we have a catalog which is specialized. We have 3 or 4 roles that are the same on a population of 20,000 salespersons of all kinds, and we have also processes that will very often be the same. So we're lucky enough to be able to scale up things. That's why it's about strategy. Our strategy is not only about POCs, POCs, and so on. We think that there are 4 or 5 main use cases. We mentioned customization, it's one of these use cases, but actually at the level of companies with 33 billion incomes, you know, it's about focusing on this scaling up. It's also about an omnichannel experience for your clients online, for instance. And AI is indeed a key tool. Absolutely. So imagine the example of the client. It's 7 p.m. The agency is closed, so our transition is omnichannel. It's about not waiting for the day after to have information. So I'm in my work site. I have 15 minutes to find the right piece, the right part. Sorry, and it's late in the evening. I'm at home. I need advice, and that's when AI is going to enable me to be customized, to provide customized information support to this client. So there's going to be someone between quotation marks who is going to provide the right recommendation to these clients at the right moment. Aurélien, earlier you mentioned the complex aspect of AI. It's an unavoidable tool, but it's a high energy consumption. How is it possible to use AI in a responsible manner, in a reasonable manner? Well, from an environment point of view, it's a bit tricky. Well, indeed, there are predictions that have been made by agencies of energy agencies or Goldman Sachs. It's the equivalent of the electric consumption of Spain. Actually, if you don't want prediction, if you want something actual, well, or current, you can have the curiosity to look into non-financial reportings from big companies. And as for, you can see that the curve is the curve shows, the graph shows that things are improving, but also it's about in order generating 1.5 billions in terms of income, in terms of sales, and also how many tons of CO2 are released in the atmosphere. So when you look at the annual figures, You can see that as for the main AI infrastructure companies, that the curves are have gone the other way around. And that's why it's interesting for the Americans, especially as for nuclear energy, generating a quantity of energy which is interesting. Yoann, you are concerned because it's also about the fact that this tool, AI, consumes a lot of energy. So what is your position? You mentioned the International Agency on Energy. 2023 data centers are about 0.5% of global energy consumption, 0.5%. So indeed, this is growing. It's booming, actually. And this is why we're very interested, because we're actors at Schneider's not only on energy supply, namely energy being supplied to these data centers. This being said, we prefer to use AI systems that will consume 0.5% to tackle 99.5% of the energy which is consumed globally. So we are both actors and consumers of data centers because we also provide turnkey solutions. But thanks to AI, the energy mix is the alternative energy mix is going to be more reliant. So we do that on the one hand, but also on the other hand, we would decrease the entry barriers in favor to the general public and so on and so forth. For instance, thanks to the AI, for instance, buildings, the owners in the United States, for instance, we have a solution that facilitates an assessment for an owner who wishes to install an electric panel or a charging station, what it's going to be like in terms of a modification of the electrical panel. So we've rolled out this assessment system and 6 months ago, and in California, 3 million households have equipped themselves with this solution. So we can imagine that in terms of supplying energy, not only when it comes to residential areas, but also the general public. Olivier, how is it possible to have responsible AI? How do we learn to manage the usage of AI? I mean, the limits of these tools. How is it possible to set the limits of these tools? At Sonepar, we're not very worried on the fact that our package recommendations related to photovoltaic solutions and so on. We are more responsible when it comes to the employee's responsibility, the corporate responsibility. The salesperson that I mentioned earlier as an example, when doing an analysis, we can see that 50% of his daily activities will be impacted in the next few years by AI, for instance, customer care, and so on and so forth. So responsible AI is that as an employer, when we know that there are thousands of people of whom the job is going to be will have to be by half adapted to AI and so on and so forth, well, it's going to be about supporting these employees and supporting and so on. And also the fact that AI shouldn't be a concern, but a vector, a means for to improve one's skills, for instance. Well, thank you very much for your expertise. Now we're going to welcome two of your colleagues to tell us about the business lines applications. Ghislaine Guittat and François Beaume from Schneider Electric. Ghislaine, you're Vice President, Corporate Credit Manager at Schneider Electric, and François Beaume, you're Senior Vice President, Risk and Insurance at Sonepar. You work with tools developed by Yoann's teams. I can imagine that you're using AI Hub to bring in AI into your business line. So how have you owned what about the ownership of this tool? Have you adjusted? Thank you, Stéphane. So indeed, I had the opportunity to deepen use cases related to our business lines, credit management with AI Hub. First, I mentioned our expectations, the information that we had that were available to us, but also the potential benefits. Amongst these potential benefits, of course, the efficiency of our operational teams, but also the increase of incomes of the turnover, the sales, the forbidding prohibition of non-payment. And thanks to AI Hub, in a very practical manner, we've assessed the creation of values from these use cases and also their feasibility. Then we've implemented the process with the organization of meetings, very short meetings, but very frequent meetings that resulted in generated results. So we've integrated these results to our tool for risk analysis and recovery, which is deployed at a global level. It's called MyTSN Manager. This has enabled all the credit managers all over the world to have access to the results related to the AI. From AI. On this basis, we've asked our credit managers a lot of work. We really needed them. We asked them to look into these analyses, these results, and to give their agreements or disagreements, along with, indeed, their comments, and the reason why they agree or don't agree, in order to improve our models, our patterns. What's interesting now, and this is key, it's a collaborative work. Indeed, the development of AI related to these use cases is not only the fact of a few persons only at a corporate level, but rather it's all the credit management community that took part to this use cases and that were totally committed into and involved into these use cases. There's a huge advantage in that, namely trust of our teams into the results obtained and expected, and also when it comes to facilitating the adoption of the results. Several times you mentioned the word results. So what were the tangible results? Because we are at the beginning of the adventure, but I'm sure you've already measured things. Indeed, we've made first steps. Now I'm going to tell you about the main use cases that we've designed and on which we've focused. The two main ones are related to, and probably you're not going to be surprised by that, but they're related to the definition, the determining of credit limit for our clients on the one hand, and on the other hand, the assessment, the level of risk of these clients. In the first use case, AI helps us to have a data point, an additional data point that we are going to use in the assessment and in the approval of the credit limits. So this is informative. It is not, in the end, the credit limit that will be the credit limit that will be approved is rather going to be approved by AI. It's a very tangible tool indeed, and it supports the decision-making process.
It's not the same for the second use case, which was related to the level of risk of a customer, because in that case, up to now, we've about 70% of our customers, and there's a lot of them, in about 70% of cases, the result of artificial intelligence is integrated directly into our ERP and is used to trigger the blocking of orders and deliveries to our customers. I would also, if I can have some additional minutes, to talk to you about another use case, which is also very interesting, because it concerns recovery of customer debts. And the goal is to simplify and to accelerate our relationship with our customers. So we use our manager software, but also the idea is to build with artificial intelligence and to improve all the communication, in particular to have a summary of telephone communications with our customers, or all the email that we can receive from our customers, which are processed, which are indicated with respect to our customer within the tool, and then the agenda of the recovery agent is updated with respect to the processes and action that has to be taken. So you can see the benefits directly, benefits in terms of efficiency, and also benefits related to better control and better monitoring of all the customer, any lateness of our customers with the right to payment. So, François, the same question for you. How can the use of artificial intelligence, how is it spreading within Sanepar, and for what concrete use cases? So, in addition to what Olivier's just said, and also what Ghislaine has just said, I'm in charge of risk management, so not in charge of loan risk, but other types of risk. And this is how we know one another. And so I can illustrate the use cases for this sector and for this function, which, like a lot of other functions, recently are faced with an inflation of the number of data to be processed for whatever reason, extension of scope within the company, so that's also an aspect, but also regulatory aspects. We're looking at S or D and things like that, which mean that we've got an expansion of the scope that has to be processed, which exceeds the capacity. That, whether it be, our teams are likely spread on the ground, so it's to help these teams and to have a more proactive approach with respect to risk management, and rather than a reactive approach, and to be able to process this data upstream, to be able to have monitoring and watching this with respect to macroeconomies, with respect to geopolitics, also with respect to business partners that we're going to closely monitor with a different number of parameters and settings, and RSG, and then also the compliance, so we can have this data and transform it into something which is going to help us to make decisions. So we've got an organizational model which is very decentralized, which means that there's a pragmatic approach and a little differentiated country by country with respect to the level of progress, because which is deployed gradually country by country. So this is the use cases that we're working on today, which are not all rolled out, but there is one that I would like to talk about that we're going to roll out at the end of the month of February, and we realized that for a certain number of subjects, the interface between risk management, legal and compliance, we were faced with internal questions and requests, customer responsibility limits, etc. And so we developed a model that we're going to roll out in the coming weeks in order to enable a person who has a question, doesn't matter where they're working, doesn't matter what the language is, where the country is, that they're going to have a guide as to how the management rules and the company policy is defined globally and locally, well, according to the subsidiarity principle, how they're going to guide this person to have a certain answer. We think 80–90% of the answers can be provided by this model, which is conversational, and for the rest of the questions, where you've got to come back, you've got to go back to headquarters with the regional teams and sort of like to help them to take the decision, or the contact person with the real person who's going to provide the answer, and this person is going to have full visibility of all the questions and also be able to deal with the request. Yeah, so that's quite practical. Carine and Coface, we can talk about you as well. Where are you with respect to AI? I imagine that you are already using these tools, but what are you using them for? We're very lucky in that we've been for over 70 years for our business lines that we've got a data infrastructure, data that we enrich constantly, that we try to improve this with our experts who are on the field. So we've got an ideal playing ground. If I just look at some of the figures here, and this is changing all the time. We're looking at about 220 million companies which are evaluated in our database, and we've got about 700 billion in assets under management, so we know them really well in about 200 countries, and we've got every day we've got information on the payment information and credit risk, which this is our expertise, which is fed into our system. So, in order, for artificial intelligence, we need data, we need structured data and reliable data. And so we've constituted, Xavier was talking about it this morning, we've got to this beefs it up. It means it leads us to be data-driven. I think it's very important in our daily work. And so over a certain number of years, we started wondering how to use these data. We've created data office and data lab. So we've got a certain amount of human expertise in order to see what we can do with the data, with the general idea to say, we're credit risk experts, and so we've got to keep improving this expertise. Which brings me to my first use case. We evaluate the scores of companies everywhere in the world. We try to see on a 12-month period if they're going to, if they pay the customers, so we can see predictability on the basis of models, and so we can improve these algorithmic models, predictive models all the time. And when you can see all the uncertainty that's out there, we need to be able to go quickly wherever in the world, create value for our customers and also for our partners. So that's the first use case scenario. And another use case scenario, we were talking about our relationship with our customers. The relationship is very digital today, whether it be client portals with APIs, with a certain number of customers that that provide software for risk management. But at one stage or another, we need to be able to how to use MAC laws, how to be able to have how to declare a loss, how to refuse or approve a loan, and so we've got practical chatbots as well, which enable us to support our customers and some of our subsidiaries in order to be able to rapidly provide them with help and support when they're managing their risk. Loan risk policies. There was another question I wanted to ask you, but Ghislaine and François, have you noticed within your teams that there's been a change, or has there been resistance that when we would in these use cases that we were talking about? Like I said from the beginning, sometimes it's complicated to adopt these tools, but from the beginning we associated all of the credit managers. So that was the recipe for success. Yeah, we had a very collaborative and cooperative approach. If we want them to trust the data, They've got to have tested the data themselves, and they really got to appropriate it and feel involved. And so I think today they start to see the advantages. And also due to a certain, an enhanced standardization with improves reliability. François, I'd also ask the question because sometimes, sort of like company directors sometimes don't like, don't like taking this step because they anticipate resistance that exists or doesn't exist. No, we haven't really encountered any resistance, but we really roll this out in a cooperative manner, especially with teams that knows what's relevant, what can be useful, what can provide productivity or security, and making decisions. And like you were saying earlier, we've got small teams. We've got a central relationship, and it's a very lean organization. So anything that can help us to secure activity and the information that we're going to transfer. If you're not a decision maker yourself, this is something that has to be relevant for the teams, and they've got to be able to appropriate it and try to get involved with it quite easily. Aurélien, you opened up this round table and you're going to wrap it up. So just to resume what's been said and to open up the subject, what are the major stakes to come with respect to AI? So thanks to have embodied these use cases for AI. I'm just going to paraphrase the whole thing. The first stake involved is dissemination of AI with probably a dynamic which is going to be exponential, is that companies that haven't tried it are going to start, that those who are going to be using it for one function are going to roll it out for other functions, and that there are sectors which are far enough from the whole thing at the moment are going to finally get closer and closer as time goes on. So I think it's going to be the major stake involved is going to be the dissemination, circulation, and one of the vectors is it going to be enough to see it in macroeconomic figures? But the use cases that we saw today show us that there's already, for a company that it's already capable of doing a difference. Second point that struck me was that the compromise between doing things quickly and doing things well, there's an aspect of competition and there's also responsibility and liability. You can't just do things willy-nilly. You've got to associate the teams concerned. And then the third contributor factor, which is a stake of culture. We're not all going to know the, we're all the culturation of decision makers. Not everybody's going to be getting involved, but when it comes to business, when we're looking at, you can see you've got to see how it rolls out in business. And the costs are going to be lowered more than we've thought. I think this is going to be a decisive factor, and another decisive factor is that the state of the art is going to change as time goes on. That what was right for us a few weeks ago, and with respect to AI, in fact, we tend to believe what was true a few weeks ago was that the quality of the models was in terms of what was invested, and as we can see with DeepSeek, sort of like the calculation by the number of hours in the model, and you can have a proxy of performance of the model and the score, etc. And there was a linear correlation between the means and the efficiency. But if you put DeepSeek within this graph, and so what we thought was true a couple of weeks ago, thanks to DeepSeek, is completely different. So of course, not everybody's going to fully understand what happened, but you've got to have the business stakes involved. We made a mistake. A lot of people made a mistake. If we look at the correlation between the amount invested and the performances, of course, everyone can make a mistake. But everybody, we don't correct errors at the same rhythm. So we've got to correct the errors at the same as quick as possible and to the best use possible of artificial intelligence. So thank you very much, all four of you. Great to have given the floor to two companies. We say that Europe is late, but you are the perfect demonstration that we know how to develop a tool in Europe, that Europe and France is also can be different. Thank you for having been the demonstration of this. Thank you very much to all of you for having followed this roundtable, and see you soon.